maybe just go over like what it is and then how where we are, like what's the stalling point and how can we push
Yep.
past to kind of put this stuff into
Well, it's been a
operation.
fascinating segue. So that's a perfect segue into tell you you've seen it. You were at the plant, and I'll
Yeah.
explain it, and then I'll explain what else I realized it could be used for. And so what it is, the thing I conceived of in a fever dream, effectively a composite structural framework encased in EPS foam that could be bolted together to form rapidly deployable super insulated structures that took a lot
Hmm.
less skill and labor to install. So that basically translates to R50 or better bolt together structural Lego blocks in a way that you could make
Yeah.
structures with, starting with housing. But, the first one happened to be, Three Bears store in Delta Junction, 29,000 square foot building put together with our panels. And interesting, bumpy rollout, but we did it. It got done, learned a lot, and moving forward. And so lot of
Hmm.
interest in the technology. As I mentioned, a lot of supporters, people that are building science experts and builders alike, start off with skepticism, look at it, and then once the light bulb goes off, yep, oh man, that's the way to do it. And
Yeah.
so it's a lot of resistance is not the right word because nobody's getting really anything done, and we're trying to
Yeah.
break through that. We're a very small part of a much larger solution. It's all hands on deck. But so anyway, so that plant, we've got metal studs put together, thermal break, so there's no conduction of heat from inside to out, so we can get better thermal performance. People can have better cost of living without having to heat their houses with expensive energy, using less energy, more resilient and tolerant of water, and able to be manufactured using two technologies that have been in the market for over 50 years, just put together in a new, novel way. So the
Right.
recent real that's what we've been pushing on, and we're getting slow traction. Again, a lot of support. A lot of the projects that have been moving forward have been kind of tripped up on this federal chaos because, unfortunately, in Alaska, a lot of housing has federal entanglements, one either directly or indirectly. That's a separate problem, but we've been trying to raise money to build the expanded manufacturing plant to build these things at the scale that's going to be needed to really move the needle on the problem. And so,
Right.
so going through the whole startup process and the entrepreneurial trying to get investors, get loans, lots of interesting obstacles in the way, just systemic.
Are you getting any direct pushback from people that would not benefit from this technology? Like you mentioned, energy costs would go down. Other builders that you may take money out of their pocket if you're doing this easier. Are you getting any pushback from those entities
Actually,
from those?
interestingly, no.
Oh,
In
good.
fact, because this whole technology was not conceived to displace or put anybody out of business. And what
Sure.
it was, what it really that analysis comes down to is we're developing a solution to help leverage the limited capacity we have to get a lot more output, and that's what we need. We need a lot more houses and better houses, and we need them now.
Right.
And so wasn't and we're not going to do that. It's going to be lots of people. We're a
It's a
small
joint
part of
effort
that.
for sure.
Yeah, it's a joint effort. It's all hands on deck on this, and
Okay.
and I think people get that. It's just getting it pushed over the cliff edge to get it to take off,
Sure.
and we're just it's like, oh, so close. But we remain undeterred. But in the course of trying to raise the money to build the plant, we're bringing manufacturing to Alaska, and
Hmm.
Alaska is not known for manufacturing. It's known
Right.
for resource development, extractive industries, tourism, but not manufacturing. So
Mhm.
that's been interesting. It's like you want to do what here? so, um, and part of the challenge we've had with that is risk tolerance.
Hmm.
Particularly, the people with the money are anxious, and that's banks and investors, whether they're institutional investors or private investors. Everybody with money is feeling uncertain because times are uncertain right
Right.
now. So there's a lot of anxiety and risk aversity. And so that's what creates what I call deep pockets, short arms. There's a lot of money floating around out there, but nobody's really eager to give it out on the hopes of a return on their investment.
Well, what can you
So
tell them to kind of put their minds at ease? Like, what can you say to these guys to kind of to it maybe make those arms a little longer? You know.
yeah, and that's it's basically putting myself in their position. It's like if I had money and somebody came to me and was describing what I'm describing, what would I do?
Sure.
And so it's that question, and so it got to, if I'm going to change the dialogue, as it were, and translate this into, yeah, I can support that, or I'll take the risk. It came down to better quantifying and then mitigating the risk. And so part of that's, we're rolling out a new technology that's modular structural framework encased in foam that bolts together to make structures. So that's kind of a one trick pony. We can make grocery stores, we can make schools, we can make buildings, we can make houses. It'll do a lot of things. We're doing some other stuff as well in parallel on infrastructure protection that's pretty exciting. But the real pivot occurred recently when, and this is me under significant financial duress trying to find ways to answer that exact question you just asked, is how do I get people you know reach a little deeper and share the risk with me,
Right.
and came down to the realization that there's nothing that says the structures that go through our process need to be shaped like skinny rectangles and bolt together to form houses. They, in fact, can be shaped like anything that will fit within a mold cavity. And we've got, we've got 7 container loads of new equipment, like big equipment here sitting in town now. It
Nice.
showed up. Don't have a building to put it in because we haven't got the money to build our own building that we will
Sure.
build out of our own panels. But that's we're but it was the realization that the frames didn't need to be shaped like skinny rectangles to form walls, and that the EPS foam that they were encased in didn't need to be shaped all the way down to the framework itself. And so the realization occurred, I think there might have been a beer or two involved in this, was that we could use the same manufacturing process we used to make panels to bolt together to form houses, could be used to make aircraft wings that could be bolted together to form large flying structures very cheaply and at high production rate.
Nice.
And so if you've been paying attention to the news at all and what's going on in Ukraine and what's going on in the Indo-Pacific region,
Hmm.
there's particularly in the Indo-PACOM theater, it's and I'm talking like aircraft, structures with 30, 40-foot wingspans that instead of costing $5 million can now cost $500,000 and be made 10 times as fast and dynamically, rapidly adaptable. And so the process by which we are manufacturing the components to build housing can also be used with almost no modification to build low cost UAS airframes. And as it turns out, there's a recognition that there's a critical gap in our America's ability to rapidly produce cheap things for warfighting sustainment outside of the current defense industrial procurement that's dominated by the Lockheed Martins and the L3 Harrises and the Boeings of the world.
Right.
As wonderful as the F-35 program is, you're not going to double its output
Sure.
ever.
Right.
so, and
So
so
speaking of
it's
that, what's the cost comparison to from your buildings to say a traditional, construction of a building?
depends on which traditional construction method it is, but haven't sorted out with the tariff implications of what's going on. But if you consider paying labor to build stuff, ours comes out cheaper, faster, better than
Nice.
any currently available construction technology. So comparable to SIPs, of course, they're now going to be costing more because of the wood going into them. Um, Stick frame construction, same thing, and those types of building take a lot of labor. And when you start to look at it's a labor workforce problem,
Yeah.
it's not just it comes down to people putting their hands on it and being able to add value to it.
Right.
And the same thing applies to the defense industry, as it turns out. These more rigidly defined ways of building things and really high technology stuff, that's wonderful. Thank goodness we have it.
Right.
But on the other end of that, finding ways to do things that meet immediate demands that are inexpensive, efficient, that don't require a massive amount of labor and high technology to produce. It's basically kind of going old school on the
Sure.
problem. And that's that idea and the fact that I cobbled together a plant that could do this out of stuff I had kind of laying around in my backyard, which is crazy as it sounds, but the idea that you can now utilize a low tech industrial base to help meet a critical defense need, that alone has caught the interest of some pretty high level folks.
Good.
So that was the pivot. Then that's opened a whole set of new doors to try to get fundraising to build. Basically, it was a housing manufacturing plant that can also build drones. Well, there's not a lot of appetite for investing in that because it seems too risky. But so now we switched modes to proposing a drone manufacturing plant that could also build housing.